Synonyms: Bandhuhu, friend; Atma, the mind; Atmanaha, of the living entity; Tasya, of him; Yena, by whom; Atma, the mind; Eva, certainly; Atmana, by the living entity; Jitaha, conquered; Anatmanaha, of one who has failed to control the mind. To but Satrutve, because of enmity; Varteta, remains; Atma Eva, the very mind; Satruvat, is an enemy. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. Translation with repetition: for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Thus ends the wonderful transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare
So
Krishna.
we're in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and if you remember, the acronym for this chapter is called EASY, but the yoga which is mentioned in this chapter is certainly not easy. And the first alphabet, E, stands for enemy or friend. And the verse that we spoke last class yesterday by Bhagavad Tattva Prabhu, and the verse that we are talking today, talks about this unique characteristic of this strange organ that all of us we possess called mind, whether it is friend or enemy. Now, actually our scriptures are so helpful and they are so practical and so relevant that often the simplicity and the relevance gets lost in our complex mind, which tries to analyze things in a very different way. So to help us see things properly, the scriptures reveal, these are revelations, but the revelation can be understood if we are in the right mood. If we are in the proper mood of understanding, then it definitely strikes a chord. Let us see this verse, very beautiful verse. These are verses of Bhagavad Gita, which are spoken by the Lord himself to Arjuna, and they have a lot of revelation in them. So the title for today's topic is how to control the mind. Let's understand the verse. So the translation goes like this: for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. For one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. So the very same thing can act in two different ways. The same mind can be our best of friends, but the same mind can also be our greatest enemy. Mind you, the word used here is superlative. Best of the friends and will be the greatest enemy. There is something which is happening, which is causing the same thing to behave in different way. And what is that thing which is happening and why that is making things so different? We will try to understand from this verse and purport. So the word used here is bandhur atmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu satrutve vartetatmaiva satruvat. Now this is another gift of our Acharya like Srila Prabhupada, who gives word-to-word meaning in the translation to complicated verses like this, where the word Atma is used multiple times and each time they have a different meaning. So there is Bandhu, Atma, Atmanas Tasya. So the first Atma in that Atmatmanas is referring to mind. Okay. Bandhur Atma, Atmanah Tasya. Atmanah is referring to the living entity, that's all of us. So for all of us, our mind, Atma, can be our Bandhu if, what is that if? Yena Atma eva Atmana Jitaha. Who has conquered the mind, who has Jitaha. So if you have conquered, the word that is used in translation is for him who has conquered the mind is the best of the friends. Right? So Bandhu Atmatmanastasya Yenatmaivatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Satrutve. Anatmana, of one who has failed to control the mind. Here, conquered has changed to control. One who has failed to control the mind, then it becomes Satrutve. Vartetatmaiva Satruvat. Apart from paying attention to these two words, Bandhu and Satrutve, which I have highlighted and put it in bold, these words Jitaha and Anatmanas is referring to one who has conquered, but the opposite of that is not who has been defeated. It is who has not been able to control the mind. For him, the mind is the greatest enemy. One more very striking point in this verse, which can be completely missed, and this is very, very powerful, and that is brought up by Prabhupada in the purport very nicely. Pay attention to this word, Varteta. Varteta means remains. And it is used in connection with Satruvat. So actually the mind remains our greatest enemy. In the purport, actually Prabhupada highlights that. Unless the mind is controlled, that's one who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy. Lives always with the greatest enemy, mind you. So imagine the situation of a person. He knows that he doesn't like someone. Not just doesn't like, he is his enemy. And that enemy is tied to him with some rope. Wherever the man is going, that enemy is also following. He is his the dreadliest enemy. And this enemy, instead of being thrown away or being kept at a far off distance, is tied to you. how bad, how precarious that situation could be. This is exactly what this verse is telling. Unfortunately, we don't know. This is the greatest enemy, and that greatest enemy remains with us always. So, before even we proceed further as to what are the techniques which Prabhupada is mentioning or Bhagavad Gita is telling, Krishna is telling about controlling the mind, sometimes it is often the need of why to control the mind is also not felt. There are two ways our scriptures are deciding or talking about mind. One is someone who's giving you constant advice. Imagine someone who's present with you and who's constantly giving you advice. And the advice that the person is giving are not for your good. It's all for your bad. But our precarious situation is we don't understand that this advice is not good for us. It's not good for me, it's bad for me. It's like someone like a Sakuni Mama who was present in the case of Duryodhan. And he was constantly giving advice, but the advice was not good, and Duryodhan was not able to understand that. We are like that Duryodhans who do not understand the constant advice, the constant chatter which our mind gives, which are not meant to be for our good, ultimate good, but rather it is meant for our bad things, not for our good things. The second analogy which the scriptures are telling is this is like a wild animal. Now imagine, I don't know how many of us would have seen, but certainly in newspaper or in channel you would have heard an elephant which is uncontrolled, or a mad elephant. If it goes out, it can create havoc, very dangerous. But it is not that the elephant is always mad or uncontrolled or something like that. There is controlled elephant also. But if the mind is uncontrolled, it is like a wild elephant or a wild horse. It can create havoc. I have seen in one place in Delhi where they were trying to control an untamed horse. It was just caught maybe 2 or 3 days before or something, and the horse was not tamed. So it was lifting its legs like this. It's first of all at a height, the person who's sitting. And if it lifts like this and the person falls down, back sab jayega. So it's very dangerous. So our scriptures, actually there are verses which talk about mind compared with wild elephant. Sometimes when we give this example or Bhagavatam talks about this analogy, we don't really understand how mind is such a big enemy. Let's try to see that a little bit. I just wanted to tell you the last verse, which was spoken by Prabhu yesterday. A very nice class. Uddharet atmanatmanam, natmanam avasadayat, atmeva hi atmana bandhur, atmeva ripuratmana. These two verses have to be taken together to read and understand. The two words which Krishna is using, which are worth paying attention, is Uddharet and Avasadayat. Avasadayat is put into degradation. Actually, our mind can degrade ourselves. Imagine if it's like a junction where there are two paths. Both are sliding down. I'm just giving for example. You can take one path and if you take that path, you fall into a ditch. Okay. And there is another path, you can slide down that side also. There's a nice comfortable bed where you can land in. You can go either way. That's a kind of a junction. It depends what path you select. But here Krishna's advice is Uddharet atmanatmanam, natmanam avasadayet. One must deliver uddharet. It is same as uddhar. Uddharet, one must deliver himself with the help of his mind. Uddharet atmanatmanam, natmanam avasadayet. You should not degrade yourself with the help of your mind. Mind can degrade, can glide us down to some things which is unthinkable. And unfortunately, how it happens, and we go through that experience, yet we don't see the need of controlling or conquering the mind. That is what Krishna says. The mind remains as our worst enemy throughout. That is the scary part, right? Bhartitatmaiva satruvat. it remains, it will always remain as an enemy, Now we all are going through the strange times where people's lives are affected by COVID. Things are uncertain. The way things work, the so-called normal has become something different now. Even if we are going through all these problems, far worse than this can be one's own mind if it is not controlled and if it is uncontrolled. Even if you have best of the facilities, everything that you need are available, you can't enjoy it because your mind is creating some havoc within, some kind of a disturbance which you don't deal. If you don't know how to deal, it is only degrading you. It is only gliding you down to a hellish path. That is why I was talking about this example of an advisor who's constantly present, who's giving you advice, smiling at you, who's telling, yes, I can give you some things which will help you, but actually he's trying to stab you at the back, which you have no idea. That's exactly what our mind does if we are not careful, or if we don't know how to neglect or what to do with this mind, basically. There was a nice article that I was reading, very, very interesting. These psychologists, little intellectual people in material world also analyze our own self, right? And the analysis that they do is pretty accurate. So this is an analysis done by a psychologist, is an American psychologist. I can share that article with you. It's done by a university research paper. Here, they've identified the three functions which we all know, being spiritualist, that the mind does: thinking, feeling, and willing. When the mind is uncontrolled, or when somebody doesn't have full control of his mind, what all he's thinking, what are his feelings, and what all he's willing, or what all are his actions. Let's just pay attention to this. Some of these things maybe we will relate to ourselves. But very interestingly, when somebody is going through such situations in his life, where the mind has really become his worst enemy, yet he's not acknowledging that or not realizing that, how further it can degrade him. So some of the thoughts that happens when a person doesn't have a controlled mind, these are like those negative self-talks. Right? Some bad experiences that one goes through in life, and those wounds are not healed, then they remain. And mind you, a person revisits these wounds and constantly, tries to revisit and experiences those pains, and then he forms certain impressions about himself. One of the things which happens if it is not, if the childhood is disturbed, or it's, depending upon the upbringing, or something, some situation, some encounters where a person's self-esteem is very low confidence, or somehow somebody has done something, life can do all kinds of things, then a constant feeling comes within, I'm not good enough. Well, I'm not good enough. It can come even in a devotee's life. I'm not good enough for anything. I can't do this in life. And the worst thing about our own mind is it creates this negative loop pretty fast, and it goes over it endlessly. So this thought gets reassured, and the record gets replayed, and then a person suddenly, he starts thinking that I'm not good. Why these cases of depression, suicide, and other things, why it is on a rise? It's because people don't know how to handle their mind. When Martin Luther King says that we have guided missiles and misguided men, he just hits the nerve at the right point where it pains. We may have made so much of scientific progress and advancement, but when it comes to controlling our mind, when it comes to having proper sense control, we're far from being expert. So here some examples are given. This is a very powerful, I thought it is very good. So the thinking is, I'm not good enough. I will never find true love. This is some for people who have got some traumatized child upbringing, or in their childhood days, if they are not treated well, parents had some strained relationships or some other things. right? So all those bad experiences in life, they get reaffirmed, or they try to look for those kind of things. So they become very, so what happens to their feeling and willing, we will see. I'm not good enough. I will never find true love. All relationships are difficult. I don't deserve being treated well. So this is a spiraling, negative spiral, which pulls one person down. One thought leads to another, and a few experiences which nobody knows why it happens, unless he has taken up to spirituality, that it is some bad karma which he has done, which is this token reaction. He is getting all those things. In a person, when he doesn't have a complete understanding of this, he forms an impression about himself and what kind of feelings he has. There is confusion, there is fear. Always there is confusion. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and fearful of everything. Difficulty in concentrating. There are nightmares, irregulation in behavior, hopelessness. There's no hopelessness, shame, moodiness. Very moody person. Sometimes he'll do something, sometimes he's not. Racing heartbeat, eating disorders. Don't eat, hunger goes away. Eating disorders, unsure of yourself, lost confidence, muscle tension, various aches and pains, backache, headaches, this ache, that ache, pains, muscle tensions. These are the feelings which comes because of uncontrolled, the mind which one doesn't know what to do with it. And what are the actions? Sometimes angry outbursts, just bursts out. A lot of negative thoughts, constantly, finding faults in all good things. There is something negative he sees. Then reliving the trauma, whatever has happened, constantly thinking, oh, why did they do this to me? What happened? Why? And so many negative spirals. Being easily startled, some little this thing, and this person is startled. Then insomnia and nightmares, no sleep in the night, some kind of thoughts, bedwetting, regression. These are all things a person suffers. I don't know how many of you can identify with this, but when they did a survey, they found many people identify with this kind of feelings, emotions, thoughts, and this kind of actions. And if somebody pinpoints what is the root cause of this, it boils down to a mind which is uncontrolled. And more importantly, people don't know that they have to take some action, corrective action. And the solution which this research paper offers is that one has to have a spiritual self-talk. Actually, the problem is not that one is a victim. It is not that the world is singling out one person and trying to blame or put him in difficult situations. It is the person himself, what he is within, he is experiencing those kind of things outside. So the within, the self needs to have a self-talk as to who he is, what the life is. There is, often you have seen this. I don't know if you have experienced this. Sometimes you bite your tongue. Have you experienced? While eating. It happens quite a lot of times. So it is not because the food is bad. It is not because you don't like the food, or it is not because some other reasons that your teeth is problematic or something. You've just bitten. Whom do you blame? Do you blame your teeth, or do you blame your tongue? What to blame in this kind of a situation? Actually, the teeth is yours. The tongue is also yours. You only have bitten the tongue. Whom will you blame? Because he was laughing, he was talking, I got distracted while eating. This is what we do in life. So even the person who is going through this feelings, this negative thoughts, and this negative spirals, needs to have a self-talk. I'm actually Krishna's. I'm eternal. I'm a part and parcel of that ocean of Satchidananda, which Prabhu keeps telling. So why I need to go through all this? This is because of my bodily identification. I am experiencing this. That is why avasadayet and uddharet. Uddharet atmatmanam, natmanam avasadayet. If we allow ourselves to degrade, there is no looking back. But as Krishna says, a man must elevate himself by his own mind. Let's see the translation and purport. Because sometimes the why is not so clear, And I thought, I think that this problem is not for me. Maybe somebody whose mind is uncontrolled, it is for them. It is for us. And we have to elevate our consciousness, as 6.5 is saying. You cannot, allow your mind to degrade yourself. So mind is a friend or enemy, depending upon whether it is controlled or uncontrolled. And the purport, brilliant purport. Actually, the small purports of Prabhupada are very, very powerful. First line of purport Prabhupada is writing, the purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. See, there are so many kind of yoga studios, yoga systems. They are talking, advertising, I'm superior, I'm better than others. But here Prabhupada is writing, the purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind. None of the yoga systems, yoga studios, they talk about controlling the mind. You may say somewhere, but the purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. You have to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. There is a human mission. There is a mission of, if you read the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, not the introduction, preface, there Prabhupada writes that in one day of Brahma, which is a huge, enormous, lengthy span of time, Krishna comes once. Okay? And the reason Krishna comes, because he has a mission. He wants to reclaim the fallen souls, that's all of us, back home, back to Godhead. For that one single purpose, he descends in one day of Brahma and he imparts this knowledge so that people like us who have got this human body can take advantage of this human body. The biggest gift that we have got is the spiritual intelligence, which the animals do not have. They act by their instincts. They have intelligence, but that is material intelligence. So that is why when he's telling avasadayat and uddharet, both is possible. Avasadayat is also possible. Degrading oneself is very, very easy. But uddharet is difficult. But that is the mission. That is the human mission. Purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. Whatever yoga one does, if the mind is not controlled, it's all simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. See? If you're not able to control the mind, you are living with the greatest enemy always. And thus his life and its mission are spoiled. Why people are not serious, why people are not determined, why people are lacking the spiritual goal, even if they have taken up to the process of devotional life, even if they have understood, is because their mind is not fully controlled. One very powerful thing which Prabhupada mentions in the purport, which is so striking, which kind of decides or defines why the mind needs to be controlled. You see this. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. This is our nature, right? Constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. The way human beings are created, the way living beings are created, they are meant to serve. They have to carry out the order of someone. Jivera Swarupaha Nitya Krishna Das. If you don't serve Krishna, you are forced to serve anger, mind, enemy, like Prabhupada is writing. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. See, this is a very powerful thing. We don't have a choice. Our constitutional position is we have to serve. Now, when we have an uncontrolled mind within, and which is our greatest enemy, it dictates terms. We follow the dictation of our lust, anger, greed, illusion, all these things they dictate and we follow. But when the mind is conquered, it has become your friend, then one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of God, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. We will elaborate on this point. First example that I wanted to give is of a story where the greatest conqueror of the world knows as Alexander, when he was here in India, he wanted to take this yogi back home to Greece, to Macedonia. And he goes to this yogi. This yogi is simply one loin cloth he was wearing, old man, he was seated in one place. And he says, "Oh, yogi." No, he didn't say like that. So I'm just, "Oh, yogi, I'll take you to Greece. Come with me. And in return, I'll give you unlimited wealth, beautiful palace to live in, nice maid servants to serve you, all 24/7. So you come here." The yogi smiled at Alexander. I don't need all of this. So he said, "Well, why not? Because you think that if you have those things, then you will be happy. But I'm already happy. I'm already experiencing happiness within. I don't need any of those things. I'm very happy in my situation." So then Alexander, hearing this answer, became very angry. He said, "Do you know whom you are talking to? I'm Alexander the Great. If you don't come with me, this is an order. Now you should come with me. If you don't come with me, then I'll chop off your head." And he removed his sword to kill him. The yogi again smiled, saying that, "Well, you want to kill me? You can kill me, but you can't kill me." So that made some wise men, when they say like this, that you can't kill me. I mean, he's having the sword, he's about to kill, and a wise man says, "Well, you can't touch me, you can't even kill me," because he's talking from a spiritual, from the soul's point of view. The body can die, the body can be cut by the material sword, not the spirit sword. And seeing that kind of a confidence, seeing that kind of a understanding of this yogi, that made Alexander even more angry. He said, "How dare you talk to me like this?" And then the yogi further smiled and he said, "Actually, you know what, Alexander? You're not even a king. Forget about being a conqueror. You're a slave of my slave." Telling someone a slave is, first of all, insulting. And on top of that, saying that you're a slave of my slave is further insulting. So Alexander got curious to know, what do you mean by slave of my slave? You said, "You see, you just now got angry. Right? And I've been practicing the spiritual thing for so many years. I have controlled my mind. And because my mind is controlled, my anger is controlled. And you are being controlled by anger. So you are slave of my slave." That got Alexander thinking that, well, this yogi, what he's saying is true. And of course, he never took it, whatever the story may be. The point is very, very powerful, very significant. Right? When we are serving the Lord, when we voluntarily learned the art of using our mind in Krishna's service, then we can control all this anger, lust, greed, avarice, all these things. And when it is not, then they are dictating us. They are pulling us. We are serving them because mind has to serve. This is our constitutional position. Very interestingly, this phenomena is nicely described by a wonderful conversation which happens between two great personalities. I'll reveal them. So the reason we are talking about this conversation is to understand the power of our mind. The need is, as I said, is a very critical, crucial one to understand. How strong this mind is and how it cheats us, defeats us, makes us his slave. So this is a conversation which is happening in Bhagavatam between two great personalities, Jadabharat and Rahugana, King Rahugana. So if you at all are serious, if you're not serious, that's a different thing. We don't want to bother you. Many people are not bothered in this life. They live their life thinking that they're doing everything great without knowing that, the greatest enemy is living close to them. And they don't even bother to take care of it. And the life goes like avasada, gets degraded. This one chapter in the 5th canto, the chapter number is 11th, and there are 17 verses. The smallest chapter in Bhagavad Gita is chapter 12 and chapter 15. Both have got 20 verses. This is even smaller than that. 5th canto, 11th chapter has got 17 verses. But if you really want to understand the mind and the nuances of this mind, read this chapter thoroughly. Beautiful chapter. I've taken few verses, not the Sanskrit, because that's not the whole purpose of showing you the Sanskrit text. But we will see the translation very beautifully. This is 5.11.4, just the translation. As long as the mind of the living entity is contaminated by the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So see this, as long as the mind of the living entity is contaminated by the three modes of material nature. One may say, no, I'll not be a servant of Krishna. At the same time, I'll not serve all this lust, anger, whatever you are saying. No, I'll not serve them. I'll be happy. But what we don't realize is we are there in this material world and we are constantly being influenced by these three modes of material nature. As long as the mind of the living entity is contaminated by the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. When two passionate people talk, when they come, and if there is little interest which is getting sacrificed, or if somebody sees that his interest is not taken care, immediately there is anger. Or if people are in ignorance, which they don't choose, but the material modes are acting, and then ignorance, then he is in illusion. What he talks, what he does, what he says, nothing, no congruence. Simply just something happens. At least goodness has some good things about it. So as long as the mind of the living entity is contaminated by the three modes of material nature, his mind is exactly like an independent, uncontrolled elephant. See, I was talking about how mind compared with a wild animal. Here is the first example. His mind is exactly like an independent, uncontrolled elephant. I don't know how many of you have seen, but elephant, if it is not controlled, it's a jungle elephant, it's scary. It's not, you can't just go freely in front of an elephant. Like that, our mind is, it's a horrible thing if it is not controlled. His mind is exactly like an independent, uncontrolled elephant. It simply expands its jurisdiction of pious and impious activities by using the senses. The result is that the living entity remains in the material world to enjoy and suffer pleasures and pains due to material activity. This is a series of verses. As I said, no, this has to be seen. I've just picked few verses, but there is a very beautiful thing which he is explaining. I don't know how many of you pay attention to, but you see this. He's telling that this is an independent and uncontrolled elephant. Which is an independent and uncontrolled elephant? Mind. Which mind? Uncontrolled mind. Why it is uncontrolled? Because it is contaminated by these three modes of material nature, right? Goodness, passion, and ignorance. So when it is contaminated, it is behaving like an independent and uncontrolled elephant. Then what it does, it expands its jurisdiction of pious and impious activities. It expands its jurisdiction. Now it is an uncontrolled elephant. So uncontrolled elephant, it's uncontrolled, right? So it goes wherever, whatever is available, it just creates mayhem, havoc. So it expands its jurisdiction. It's a jurisdiction is a law word. Right? It's used in in the law terminology. Expands. So it increases its scope of activity. How? By doing pious and impious activities. How does it do pious and impious activities? Using the senses. And what happens? The result is that the living entity remains in the material world to enjoy and suffer pleasures and pains due to material. How this? I mean, why the mind is our worst enemy? That part has to be very clearly understood so that our choice is very strong. The why, when it is strong, action also will be strong. Why is weak, then action also is weak. So when we don't know this, then the nature or how the mind becomes uncontrolled and what happens for an uncontrolled mind, as you know, this verse is telling Jadabharat. Jadabharat is great, exalted personality. We will come to him maybe some other time. Wonderful conversation this is. So it expands its jurisdiction of pious and impious activities by using the senses. Senses becomes the means when the uncontrolled elephant or the mind, which wants to expand its jurisdiction, it uses the senses, it engages the senses, go out for sense gratification. The result is that the living entity remains in the material world to enjoy and suffer pleasures and pains due to material activity. Very interestingly, what happens next? He says, because it's the next verse. Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities. It happened. So it wants to expand its activities using the senses and doing the pious and impious activities. Now he's telling, because the mind is absorbed in desires, one of the critical and crucial thing which we have to understand, the mind, which is uncontrolled, produce thousands of desires, unlimited desires to enjoy in various ways. That thinking, because it is uncontrolled and it is producing. What happens after that? Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities, it is naturally subjected to the transformations of lust and anger. Either way, the moment we are trying to fulfill our desires, the more the mind is becoming slave of those things. It never gets satisfied. So either it becomes lust or greed, or it becomes anger when it is not fulfilled. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. See, material sense enjoyment attraction comes by this. When the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities, it is naturally subjected to the transformations of lust and anger. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. In other words, the mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. There are 11 senses and 5 material elements. And out of these 16 items, the mind is the chief. Mind is the chief. Which are the 11 senses? He said knowledge acquiring senses. What are the other senses called? Five working senses and 5 knowledge acquiring senses. What are the knowledge acquiring senses? Eyes, nose, ears, nose, tongue, touch. 5 over? We missed anything. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch. 5 knowledge acquiring senses. This is how we perceive the material world with the use of all these 5 senses. What are the 5 working senses? Who can say what are the 5 working senses? Don't know. Okay. First is hands. With this we do work. Legs. Then speech. Speech, you can give command to someone, you do this. So these are all working senses. So hands, legs, speech, then you have genitals and the anus. 5. So 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 working senses. 5, 5, 10, and which is the 11th one? Okay. So the chief among this, it is, where is it? There are 11 senses and 5 material elements. 5 material elements, Bhumirapo Nalovayu, Kham Manobuddhire. 5, there are 11 senses and 5 material elements. And out of the 16 items, the mind is the chief. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies amongst demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in a higher or a lower position, it accepts a higher or lower material body. What we don't realize is when we die, our subtle body still remains. And the subtle body goes to another gross body. The conceptions of life that we are carrying gets carried forward to the next body. Today in the morning, we were seeing that depending upon the different conceptions of life, one does different activities. And based on the activities that one is doing, his aims are different. So where does this conceptions of life get stored? It gets stored in the mind, and it continues birth after birth. It continues body after body. So the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies. You see how it is our worst enemy. I mean, so it is very beautiful, and the purport is excellent purport for all these verses that I'm just saying. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies among demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in a higher or a lower position, it accepts a higher or a lower material body. Then he goes on further. The materialistic mind, covering the living entity's soul, carries it to a different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusioned, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and they are karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. So this is a repeated cycle of karma and reactions. The thing which is driving the materialistic person is the materialistic conception of life. So that mind covers the living entity's soul. It's the real eternal nature of the living entity is covered, and it carries that conception of life from different species from one species to another species of life, and this is called continued material existence. And the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusioned, the mind further creates pious and impious activities, and their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. There's one last one. There are two verses that I'll say. This is one beautiful verse in 5:11:8, where he's telling when the living entity's mind becomes absorbed in the sense gratification of the material world, it brings about his conditioned life and suffering within the material situation. And now comes he's leading towards the solution. However, when the mind becomes unattached to material enjoyment, it becomes the cause of liberation. And a very beautiful analogy. The analogies of Srimad Bhagavatam are very, very powerful, very effective, very easy to understand. Pay attention to this. When the flame in a lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. Have you seen this? I don't know how many of you have seen. It used to exist earlier days, lantern or those lamps. If it is not burned properly, then it will produce some black shoot. That what do you call the wick? It will become black, and the glass, if it is there, that also becomes black. When the flame in a lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. But when the lamp is filled with ghee and is burning properly, there is bright illumination. Similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering. And when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about the original brightness of Krishna consciousness. In the purport to this verse, Prabhupada explains that when one is attached to sense gratification or materialistic conceptions of life, then he expects things. Expectation is nothing but desires. He is never satisfied with his present state of life. He desires more and more. If I have this, I'll be happy. If I have that, I'll be happy. So these are all expectations. But a person who's unattached, who's detached, as this mentioned, when the flame in a lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. But when the lamp is filled with ghee and is burning properly, there is bright illumination. Similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering. And when detached from material sense gratification, is basically accepting. These two words, expecting and accepting, are very, very different. Expectation or expecting something is a sign of a person who is deeply rooted in material conception of life. Even devotees, after having understood the importance of spiritual life, often have those desires. That is why Anyabhilasita Sunyam. That is why they take the example of Parikshit when he was cursed. He didn't expect, why did this happen to me? Why the Lord is not protecting me? Why this kind of thing? He accepted that. This is the hand of the Lord. Had it not happened, I would have continued my material existence perpetually. It is a blessing on me that this curse has come upon. Now I have become ready and prepared to hear Bhagavatam. There is a very nice story about Akbar and Birbal. So once Akbar and Birbal, they were going in a city in disguise, and they went quite a lot of distance. Like Badri Prabhu travels sometimes, and this goes quite far. So they went, and then they got fully exhausted. Sometimes when somebody is lost or is busy, absorbed in seeing things, he doesn't realize how much distance or how much time has passed. Those things, sometimes it becomes forgotten. So then they went there and they both realized that it is quite a distance and they can't go back. So they thought we should eat something. They were feeling hungry. Actually, Birbal is a devotee of Lord Ram. He's a Hindu, though he was there in the empire of Akbar, who's a Muslim king. So Akbar was so disgusted. Birbal, how can you think of Lord and chanting or whatever it is? First, we need to eat something, otherwise we'll not survive. So he went out to get some food somewhere. He went out and searching. And then finally, with great difficulty, he found some food and he ate and he felt so satisfied. Once the belly is satisfied with food, a person thinks that's great. Then he thought, poor Birbal, he was also coming with me. He was also exhausted, tired, so much distance they've walked. I should carry some food for him. So he goes to Birbal and says, you foolish Birbal, you foolish Birbal. You see, you're sitting here. I did this hard work. I got this food, and that's how I could satisfy my hunger. I brought something out of compassion for you. Birbal just finished his chanting and he said, who's really foolish? You were expecting that to happen. Actually, Birbal was not expecting the food to come from Akbar. He was not. It was not like the moral of the story is not that, don't do anything and sit and chant and things will happen. That's not the case. The thing is, he was not having these desires. He was not worried about it. He was more concerned about finishing his spiritual activities, whereas Akbar, being desirous, being, looking for some things, he was more anxious. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a beautiful verse which comes in the 2nd chapter, 70th verse. I don't know, I'll come to this little later. Have it here. 2nd chapter, 70th verse says, Apuryamanam achalam pratishtha. Apuryamanam achalam pratishtha. Samudra mapah pravishanti yadvat. Tadvat kama yam pravishanti sarve sasanti mapnoti nakama kam. Very beautiful verse. Apurya manam achala pratishtam. It is not that we will not have material desires. They will come as long as the material mind is there. You will have lot of desires. Apurya manam achalam pratishtam. But the example which Bhagavad Gita is giving is that of an ocean, samudram. Like the rivers which flow into the ocean, yet the water of the ocean remains steady. Similarly, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled, but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So, similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering. And when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about the original brightness of Krishna consciousness. Now, Jadabharat in 5:11:17, the last verse, gives the solution. And the solution is very, very powerful. This I've got the verse here. This verse is spoken by Jadabharat. He's telling, Bhratravyamenam tadadabraviryam Upekshayadhyayadhitam apramatta Guror Haresh Charanopasanastro Jahi Velikam Swayamatma Mosham. What is the solution? Let's read the translation. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. Mind you, the word used here is uncontrolled mind, not the mind alone. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. 2 words, if one neglects it or gives it a chance. Neglects it means one who's callous, who doesn't know how to control or care about it, or who's giving it a chance. Whatever the dictation of mind is, who's following that, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. See the word used for mind, although it is not factual because it is a material energy. Bhumirapo nalavayu kham mano buddhirevacha ahankara ityam mein bhinna prakriti rashtada. This is a material element. Although it is not factual, but it is very strong. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he repeats, do this with great care. O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master. How important it is to have the spiritual master in our life, and how important it is to be engaged in the service of the spiritual master. Because the words of spiritual master has to be taken very, very seriously. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittite Koriya Aikya. Arna Koriho Mane Asa. This mana and asha, these are inseparable. As long as mind is there is desires. Asa is there. But Guru Mukha Padma Vakya is the one which can cut. Please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. Actually, Jada Bharat is repeating this because he himself neglected when he was Bharat Maharaj. He didn't do that properly, and he had to take birth as a Bharat, as a deer in one of his lives. In the last line of this verse in the purport, Prabhupada mentions, if one abides by the orders of the spiritual master, by the grace of Krishna, he is freed from service to the mind. When we say in our devotee community that authorized service is important, why we say that? If one abides by the orders of the spiritual master, it is not our skills, it is not how much we know, it is not how talented I am and I can exhibit that. That's not what is required. If one abides by the orders of the spiritual master, just following, then by the grace of Krishna, he is freed from the service to the mind. Because otherwise, we are just serving the dictation of our mind. Mind says this is good, I am doing. Mind says this is not good, I'll not do. But if one abides by the orders of the spiritual master, by the grace of Krishna, he is freed from service to the mind. I wanted to say the same thing which Jada Bharat says in the translation. He's telling that mind is not factual. What is it? It covers the constitutional position of the self. So, King, please try. Where is it? Although it is not factual, it is very strong, right? Elsewhere in Bhagavatam, there is a purport where it is mentioned the mind is the center of all activities and is described here as Brihad Bala, very powerful. To get out of the clutches of Maya, material existence, one has to control his mind. According to training, the mind is the friend and the enemy of the living entity. If one gets a good manager, his estate is very nicely managed. But if the manager is a thief, his estate is spoiled. Similarly, in his material conditional existence, the living entity gives power of attorney to his mind. As such, he is liable to be misdirected by his mind into enjoying sense objects. Srila Ambarish Maharaj therefore first engaged his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. Sabai Manah Krishna Padara Vindayoho. When the mind is engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, the senses are controlled. I don't know, it's 4:21:23 or something. See, this is the reason why our scriptures are telling that the mind is the worst enemy, why Krishna is telling. Because it is a very powerful thing. Mind is the center of all activities and is described here as Brihat Bala. Very powerful. So to get out of the clutches of Maya, material existence, one has to control his mind. And according to training, the mind is the friend and the enemy of the living entity. If one gets a good manager, his estate is very nicely managed. If the manager is a thief, then it is spoiled. Beautiful example of Ambarish Maharaj. The first thing that he does is first engages his mind in the lotus feet of Krishna. Savai Manah Krishna Padara Vindayo. After that, all Pachan say Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane, and then other things are there. Other senses also engage. But the first is the mind. Savai Manah Krishna Padara Vindayo. When the mind is engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, the senses are controlled. I have a few things to finish. I'll quickly finish. There are these three things which mind does, and that's how our existence in this material world gets elongated. One is speculation, second is designation, and the third is favorable arguments. Where did I get these three things? This is given in the beautiful example of same Jada Bharat in his previous life when he was Bharat Maharaj, who has given up everything, having understood the triviality, the temporariness of material life. He has given up his material life. He has gone to a forest and he is doing very severe austerity. But how? Because of these three things. This is pointed out by Prabhupada in the purports: speculation, designation, and favorable arguments. Even though he was a devotee, very advanced, he fell down because of not controlling his mind properly. So what to talk about us? That is why this mind is so important to be conscious of. One of the things which Prabhupada mentions is just by knowing that the mind is so powerful, one understands one's humble position, and once one becomes genuinely humble, and the genuine humility is there, he attracts the mercy of Krishna. Here, these three things which I have written, just pay attention to these two verses I have. The great king Maharaj Bharat began to think, alas, this helpless young deer, by the force of time is a representation of Krishna, right? We know from Bhagavad Gita. Kalosmi Bharatarshava. The great king Maharaj Bharat began to think, alas, this helpless young deer, by the force of time, an agent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has now lost its relatives and friends and has taken shelter of me. It does not know anyone but me, as I have become its father, mother, brother, and relatives. This deer is thinking in this way, and it has full faith in me. It does not know anyone but me. Therefore, I should not be envious and think that for the deer my own welfare will be destroyed. I should certainly raise, protect, gratify, and fondle it. When it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? These are all classic favorable arguments which the mind creates. Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, I realize that a helpless person who has taken shelter cannot be neglected. That would be a great fault. So these are all speculations, designation, and favorable arguments. One thing which definitely Prabhupada mentions in the purport is he was alone, Bharat Maharaj. Didn't have the association of devotees, didn't follow the instructions of his spiritual master strictly. Two things. And started listening to his mind, which gives all the speculations, these designations, and the favorable arguments, justifies the actions, right? This deer is thinking in this way, and this is classic example. The deer has just come, but how he is neglecting his spiritual activities and giving shelter to this poor deer. Same thing happens in our life also. We allow a small crack to happen in our life. It is okay. It's okay. After all, you are chanting for so long. One day you don't chant, what is going to happen? Is the sky going to fall? No, nothing is going to happen. It's like your life is going to be, is coming to a grinding halt or stop? No, nothing. Sleep nicely. Tomorrow you chant with renewed vigor, with more energy. It's a positive, this thing. And we allow this mind's justification, favorable arguments. But so hard. One day it's for you. Or, you've been doing this devotional practices for so long, you deserve a break. Oh, you go for some vacation, do something, run around. They're all mind's arguments. And we justify that. We speculate and we look for designations. These are all very, very subtle things. These things are worth paying attention because we all fall victim to these things like Bharat Maharaj. If Bharat Maharaj, such an exalted devotee, can fall victim to this, who are we? Are we really more powerful than Bharat? But yet we don't pay attention to this. And our acharyas, our scriptures are revealing this. That's why I said at the beginning, these are all revealing things. Even though one is in the renounced order, one who is advanced certainly feels compassion for suffering living entities. One should certainly neglect his own personal interests, although they may be very important to protect one who has surrendered. So he is justifying his action. I had one or two verses more, but I would not go there. I'll stop here. The point is very succinctly brought. If you missed out, I can repeat one more time. But first and foremost that we saw was how powerful the mind is. The comparison of mind with wild animals is very appropriate in Bhagavatam. And why it is compared with a wild animal. That also we saw. How it entangles us in this material world. How this mind continues to stay with us even after this life in different bodies. And how if we don't control it, it remains as our enemy and remains with us perpetually. Right? And then the uncontrolled mind gets attached to sense gratification and produces unlimited desires. And we saw that apuryamanam achalam pratishtham, that verse, how one has to learn to, when these desires come, not to get carried away by them and try to fulfill, but rather tolerate them. The third thing we saw, which is the most powerful and most important thing, is to the process of controlling the mind is to engage or to use the weapon of devotional service to spiritual master in Krishna. And Jada Bharat says, do it with care. Do it with care. So if we follow strictly the instructions of our spiritual master and not listen to any kind of speculation or designation or favorable arguments of mind, that is the only way we can control it. I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments. Questions? Pious impious activities, which came in that Jada Bharat's instruction. So, how does the mind expands its jurisdiction of activities? When the mind is uncontrolled, so it has to do something. So it expands its jurisdiction of activities by engaging in those pious and impious activities, and it enjoys the fruits of it. I'll read that one more time. Yeah, so basically, when the mind is contaminated by the modes of material nature, it has to act. So when it acts like an independent, uncontrolled elephant, and it expands its jurisdiction of pious and impious activity. So your question is, pious activity, what is it good or bad? Or what is it? Yeah, so pious activity, you can do some charity when you're in the mode of goodness. You can do some helping some orphanage or something like that. They're all pious activities, but you're not freed from the reactions of that. Any other question? Giri ji, Bhagavad Tattva Prabhu, Chandra Prabhu Mataji, Shweta ji. You have a question?
Yes, Prabhu. Actually, when we say we are the soul, no, how is that this mind is trying to, is it being as an external trying to impact us?
It's a good question. Basically, I think in one of the purports that I was reading, in the conditioned living entity, when he has accepted this body, he has given the power of attorney to mind. Actually, soul is superior. But right now, in our conditioned state, without understanding our true nature, we have assigned the power of attorney to our mind, and mind dictates terms. Right? So, so like whatever the lowly things, sometimes we get angry, sometimes we get greedy, sometimes we get lusty. All these things are there because it's all produced from the mind, right? And we are following the dictation of this. Once one understands the true nature of one's own self, can he control? Can he know? I mean, can he use the intelligence to control this mind? So there is a hierarchy which is given. But when we don't have a proper understanding, then it's a topsy-turvy thing. There is a very nice chariot analogy which is given in Bhagavad Gita as well. If you see, there is a picture of that also in Bhagavad Gita, where it is there's 5 senses. They represent the 5 horses, which are going in 5 different directions. There is a charioteer who's trying to control these horses with the help of a rope or a rein, and there is a passenger who's there at the back. These 5 horses represent the 5 senses. The rope or the rein represents mind, and the charioteer is intelligence, and the soul proper is the passenger. Ideally, the soul should give instruction or direction to the charioteer, and he should be able to drive the chariot. But right now, since the power of attorney lies with mind, which is on kind of, there is no control. So wherever the senses are pulling, the mind is going ahead with them. And since intelligence also is weak, it doesn't know how to control the mind. So this whole process of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, or the scriptures, are aimed at making our mind controlled, making our mind our true friend. And that is possible by the help of chanting the names of the Lord, by strengthening our spiritual intelligence. That way, this mind can become controlled. And when it becomes controlled, it automatically engages in devotional service to God. Otherwise, it is tough. Does that help?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you.
I saw yesterday you had asked a question to Bhagavad Tattva Prabhu, the 3 things that he mentioned in the beginning. And I think we could not get that, but that was a good question.
Yeah, the purpose of yoga system, influences of mind and senses, how to disentangle.
Yes, yes. That's good. Any other question? Chandrababu Mataji, any question?
No, Prabhuji.
All right, if no question, I'll request you to come in front of your camera and raise your hands. We'll chant once Hare Krishna Mahamantra and then stop for today. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jagranthra Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna.